Next, sew on the strap. This is the pre-made strap. Attach it directly to the back of the main part. Sew the top part onto the center of the main part. The opening edge goes downward. For the bottom straps on both sides, attach them about 2 centimeters inward from the bag's edges. Slightly angle them toward the sides. The side components here can be placed facing downward, or you can place them facing upward. You can trim the excess part, or you can leave it. Next, I'll provide a method for sewing the strap. For your reference, you can also sew it according to your preference. Please watch the demonstration. Since the holes on the securing piece are small, before sewing, use a thin needle to go through the holes first. This makes the subsequent sewing more convenient. Go through each hole. After completing this step, start sewing. Place the securing piece in the corresponding position. Insert the needle from inside the piece to come out. Leave a little yarn tail. Then insert into the corresponding hole of the securing piece. Pay attention to insert from the wrong side. Next, insert into the adjacent hole. Exit through the previously reserved loop. Pull tight. Insert again from the wrong side. Come out through the next hole of the securing piece. Then insert back into the same hole. Exit through the hole on the left side. Then insert into the left hole. Exit through the adjacent hole. Insert into the right hole. Everyone, follow this method. Continue sewing all the way around the circle. Pay attention to adjust the position while sewing. Make sure not to sew crooked. After completion, tie a knot on the wrong side and cut the thread. This completes the sewing of the securing piece on the top. Now sew the securing pieces at both ends of the strap below. I'll start with the right strap here. You need to trim a bit off the bottom of the strap before sewing. Use the securing piece for alignment. Cut off the excess part. After cutting, lightly cinch the edge with a lighter. Next, place the strap underneath the base piece. Mind that the strap should not be twisted here. After confirming the position, secure the strap to the base piece with a few stitches first. Then pick up the securing piece. Sew the securing piece onto the top of the strap next. The sewing method is the same as for the securing piece on top. Before sewing, you also need to thread the needle through the chain space above. Everyone finishes sewing this circle. After sewing, tie off and weave the yarn on the wrong side. This completes the sewing of the right side strap. The left side strap can be sewn using the same method, in a symmetrical position. This concludes the explanation of the straps. Next, we will make the claws. There are front claws and back claws. Make and attach them separately. Start with the front claws first. There are a total of 2 front claws. Each front claw is divided into toes and the palm. Start by crocheting the toes. You will need to crochet 3 of them. After completion, connect them and crochet the palm. Please watch as I demonstrate. First, crochet the toes. Pick up the corresponding yarn. Begin with a magic ring. Then make 1 chain. This beginning chain is not marked in the chart. In actual crocheting in rounds, you always start with a beginning chain. Then pick up the magic ring. Crochet 8 single crochets. After completion, close the ring. Finally, pick up the first single crochet and join with a slip stitch. Tighten it. Then leave a bit of tail and fasten off the yarn. At this point, 1 toe is completed. Repeat the same method to crochet 2 more toes. Note that one of the toes needs to be fastened off. Leave the last toe without cutting the yarn. After completing, start crocheting the palm. Continue with the toe that wasn't fastened off. Start with 1 chain. Then pick up the stitches from the current toe. Work evenly in each stitch for 8 single crochets. The starting tail can be woven as you crochet. At this point, work evenly. The piece will curve inward. Turn the right side out. Pick up the toe that was fastened off and work downward. Pick up stitches and work 4 single crochets evenly. Do not weave the starting tail at this point. Only weave the yarn tail when you fasten off at the end. After completing, pick up the remaining toe. Pick up stitches and work 8 single crochets evenly. Similarly, do not weave the starting tail here. Once completed, turn the piece so the right side is facing out. Work downward by picking up stitches on the left side of the toe. For the remaining stitches, work single crochets evenly. After completing, pick up the first single crochet of the starting toe and join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. Then secure the yarn tails. Leave the 2 long tails from the beginning chain and trim the other short ends. At this point, the first round is completed. The 3 toes are now joined together. And we'll move on to crochet the second round. Start with 1 chain. Then pick up the stitches from the previous round, working evenly into each stitch. Finally, pick the first stitch and join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. The second round is complete. For the remaining rounds, continue picking up the stitches from the previous round and work in rounds. Just refer to the chart and crochet accordingly. After crocheting, make sure to leave a corresponding length of yarn for sewing. Once completed, sew the openings between the toes. Here, use the previously reserved yarn tail from the magic ring for sewing. Pull the yarn tails to the outside separately. Thread them into a darning needle. Pick up the opening and sew 1-2 stitches. There's no specific requirement for the method, just ensure it's secure. After finishing, tie the yarn tail with an adjacent stitch in a knot. Then bring it to the inside. The remaining yarn tails can be stuffed directly into the piece. Following the same method, sew up the other opening. You can finish this part on your own. After that, you'll need to stuff a little filling inside. First, fluff up the stuffing by rubbing it. Then, insert it into the piece. You can use scissors to help with this step. Be careful when you're stuffing it in. Be careful not to prick your hands. At the same time, control the amount of stuffing yourself. Just make sure the piece is round and firm. Next, close the opening. Thread the reserved yarn into a sewing needle. Then pick up the front loops of the last round of stitches. Here, the two strands of the stitch, the one closer to you is the front loop. Pick up the front loops and insert the needle sequentially. Finally, pull the yarn tight. Tie a knot and secure it to the adjacent position. That's how you complete the closing. At this point, one front paw is done. Everyone can make another front paw using the same method. Next, move on to assembling. Here, I'm demonstrating with a small sample. Point the toes downward. Then place them symmetrically above the TPU edging. The curved ends should align properly. You can refer to the finished product for the exact position. You can also make adjustments according to your preference. Then use the reserved yarn. So to attach the bottom of the front paw, where it meets the piece. There's no specific requirement for the method. Just make sure it's secure. First, bring the thread to the wrong side. Finally, tie off and weave in the end. You can tie a few extra knots for added security. Weave the tail inside the piece. And that's how you attach one front paw. Just attach the other front paw symmetrically. You can do it on your own. That concludes the tutorial for the front paws. Next, we'll move on to the back paws. They are divided into the small toe, the large toe, the palm, the large pad, and the small pads. Start by crocheting the toes, then connect them and crochet the palm. After that, crochet the pads separately and attach them. Let's start with the toes. There are two kinds here, large and small. The method for crocheting the small toe is identical to the front paw toes. The first round of the large toe is the same as the small toe. Then you need to crochet another round of single crochets evenly. For each round of the toes, start with one chain. At the end of each round, slip stitch into the first stitch and pull tight. Pay attention to the second round of the large toe. Before slip stitching, make sure to turn the right side of the piece outward. That's the side with the neat stitch texture. After crocheting the small toes, cut the yarn. For the large toes, cut the yarn for one of them, but leave the other uncut. Refer to the chart, and complete the corresponding toes. Once finished, move on to connect the two large toes next. Start by continuing from the large toe that hasn't been cut. Chain 1. Then work 8 single crochets into each corresponding stitch. After completing, pick up the other large toe. Crochet 8 single crochets evenly. Weave the yarn tail as you crochet. Leave the starting yarn tail for later use. Once done, pick up the starting single crochet and join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. At this point, the first round is complete. Continue by crocheting the second round. You need to connect the little toe. Start with one chain. Then pick up stitches and work 4 single crochets. Pick up the little toe. Work 8 single crochets evenly. Flip the right side of the piece outward. Afterward, pick up the remaining stitches from the adjacent large toe. Work 4 single crochets evenly. Then pick up the stitches on the left side of the large toe. Work 4 single crochets evenly. Pick up the last little toe. Crochet 8 single crochets. You only need to keep 3 yarn tails here. The yarn tail of the last toe can be woven as you crochet. Flip the right side of the piece outward. Trim the remaining yarn tails. Continue picking up stitches on the left side of the large toe below. Pick up the remaining stitches. Crochet 4 single crochets. Finally, pick up the beginning chain and join with a slip stitch. Pull tight. At this point, the second round is complete. Here, you can check the stitch count. For the remaining rounds, just crochet according to the chart. After finishing here, use the reserved yarn to sew up the gap. Then stuff with an appropriate amount of stuffing. Finally, sew up the ending opening. Here, I'll demonstrate the method. Here, I'm demonstrating with a small sample. Thread the reserved yarn through a needle. Then align the piece horizontally. Press the opening flat. Start from the edge and move downward. Pick up the corresponding stitches on both sides of the opening and sew them together. Follow the whip stitch method. Insert the needle sequentially. Finally, tie a knot with the yarn to secure it in place near an adjacent stitch. Leave the remaining yarn tail for now. That concludes the explanation for the pom. Next, crochet the large pads separately, and the small pads. The methods and stitches used have been demonstrated before. You can simply refer to the chart for crocheting. When attaching, since the pieces are small, you can use a glue stick to attach them. If you want it to be more secure, you can also sew them on with yarn. If you choose to sew with yarn, make sure to leave a corresponding length of yarn tail after crocheting. When there's no need for sewing, just leave a bit of tail and fasten off the yarn. That concludes the explanation for crocheting the small pads. For the final assembly and attachment, place the small pad with its wrong side facing out, positioned below the toe. If sewing with yarn, use the reserved tail to pick up the edges and sew together roughly in correspondence. There's no strict requirement for the method, as long as it's secure and looks nice. Here, the sewing is left for you to complete on your own. I'll demonstrate the method of using a glue stick to attach. Here, the yarn tail is pressed directly underneath the piece. If the tail is too long, you can trim it a little. Then place it in the corresponding position. After that, use the glue stick to attach it. When using the glue stick for attaching, you can burn the glue stick with fire to apply it. If you have a hot glue gun at home, you can insert the glue stick into the glue gun instead. Then apply the glue on the inside of the piece. Then glue it to the proper position. This way, the small pad is attached. The large pad is installed in the same way. Similarly, make sure the wrong side of the piece faces out. Then place it in the middle of the palm. You can sew it with yarn or use a glue stick to attach it. Everyone can complete this part on your own. That concludes the explanation of how to install the large pad. Finally, attach the entire back paw to the sides and slightly below the TPU. Here, the toes should point inward. You can refer to the finished product for the effect, or install it in a suitable position based on personal preference. Use the yarn tail that was reserved earlier. Pick up and sew a few stitches at the spot where it sticks closely. There's no strict requirement for the method. As long as it's secure and looks nice, everyone can complete this step on their own. This concludes the explanation of the back paw. Next, we will make the collar. Start by crocheting the rope, then attach the tag. The crocheting method for this rope is the same as the edging around the TPU part. Start with a foundation chain, then crochet 1 row of single crochets. After finishing, check the dimensions to ensure it fits well. Follow along above the TPU. Crochet all the way around the top edge in a circle. Here, the side is below the zipper opening. Place the beginning and ending connection at the back. Once the size fits properly, you can break the yarn after that. Then sew together using the same color thread. You can use a glue stick to fix a few points temporarily. This makes sewing easier. Use the sewing thread afterward. Pick up and sew the wrong side of the piece roughly. There's no strict requirement for the method. Just make sure it's secure. Complete this step on your own. Finally, attach the tag at the front. Here, let me demonstrate for you. Use the same color yarn as the one used for crocheting the collar. Cut a long piece of yarn tail. Thread it into a darning needle. Then make sure the right side of the tag faces out. Place it in the centered position at the front. Slip and sew a few stitches at the bottom to secure it. Sew multiple times to ensure it's firm. Finally, tie the 2 yarn tails into a knot to secure them. Weave the yarn tails and the knot inside the piece. This way, the tag is attached. That concludes the explanation of the collar. Next, let's attach the wings. Here, cut the wings apart from the middle. Then glue them directly next to the front paws. Below the collar. You can refer to the finished product for positioning, or adjust according to your preference. Here, only glue the bottom part of the wings. Everyone can complete this on their own. That concludes the explanation of the wings. Next, we will create the facial features. It includes the eyes, nose, blush, and ears. The nose needs to be embroidered. The rest requires crocheting. Start by crocheting them separately. After completion, assemble them and embroider the nose. Begin with crocheting the eyes. Start with a foundation chain of 3 stitches. Then start from the second to last stitch. Pick up 1 strand of the chain. Work at SC 3 in 1. If you see square brackets in the chart, it means the stitches within the brackets are worked in the same position. Pick up 1 strand from the left chain. Work 5 single crochets into the same spot. This completes the stitches inside the brackets. Next, pick up the remaining half of the adjacent chain. Work at SC2 in 1. Finally, pick up the starting single crochet. Join with a slip stitch. There's no need to pull it tight here. If you need to sew when assembling, leave enough yarn for the corresponding length. If no sewing is needed, just cut the yarn. You can trim the leftover yarn from the foundation chain. That's how you finish crocheting the eyes. Later, you'll need to sew on highlights for the eyes. Refer to the chart and pick up the corresponding color yarn. Take a long tail of yarn, then separate one strand from the yarn. Insert it into a thin needle. Next, turn the eye with its wrong side facing out. Place it vertically. At a point slightly above the left of the top stitch. Embroider a French knot with 6 rounds. Bring the yarn tail out from back to front. Start by leaving a bit of yarn. Then, at the exit point, wrap the yarn around the needle 6 times. Here, the loops should be tightly connected. After that, press the yarn with your thumb. Pull the needle out. Insert it again just beside the exit point. This will create a large highlight. Tie the 2 tails together to secure it. Next, at the position on the lower right, embroider a small highlight. Exit from the corresponding position. Then wrap the yarn around the needle 2 times. Again, make sure the loops are flush against the piece. Pull the needle out. Insert it into an adjacent position. This completes the small highlight. Tie it off with the starting end to secure it. Trim the remaining strands and place them on the inner side of the piece. That's how you finish embroidering the highlight. Everyone can follow this same method. Crochet the other eye, and embroider the highlight on top. That concludes the explanation for the eyes. Next, we'll discuss the blush. The crochet method is the same as for the large pad. You can simply follow the chart to crochet it. At the end, leave yarn tails as needed. Complete it on your own. That finishes the explanation for the blush. Moving on, let's talk about the ears. There are 2 in total. Each ear is divided into the outer ear and inner ear. Crochet them separately, then assemble them together. Let's start with the outer ear. Begin with the magic ring, then crochet in rounds. 3 new stitches are used here. F double crochet, T half double crochet, FVDC 2 in 1. Please watch me demonstrate. Start with a magic ring. Then make 3 chains. These 3 chains count as 1 double crochet. Next, pick up the magic ring, and work 11 double crochets. After completing, close the ring. Then pick up the top chain from the beginning chains. Insert the hook into 2 strands of yarn. Work 1 slip stitch to join. Tighten the yarn. Now the first round is complete. Next, move on to the second round. Start with 3 chains. These count as 1 double crochet, then pick up the position of the previous round's beginning chain. This is the hole where the slip stitch was inserted earlier. Work 1 double crochet into it. You can weave the starting yarn tail as you work. At this point, the stitch pattern inside the brackets is completed. Next, pick up the stitch on the left side, and work a DC 2 in 1. This means working 2 double crochets into the same stitch. The stitch might look slightly puckered here. Just insert your hook into the top 2 strands of yarn. One stitch. 2 stitches. The DC 2 in 1 is now complete. Continue picking up each stitch from the previous row. Work DC 2 in 1 correspondingly. After completing, pick up the third chain from the beginning chain. Insert the hook into 2 strands of yarn and work a slip stitch to join. Pull tight. The second round is complete. Continue with the third round. Start with 3 chains. Match the beginning chain with the stitch below. Pick up the stitch on the left side. Work double crochets evenly. After completing, turn the piece so the right side faces outward. The side with the yarn tail is the wrong side. Then locate the third chain from the beginning chain. Work a slip stitch to join. Pull tight. The third round is complete. For the following fourth and fifth rounds, simply refer to the chart to crochet. Remember, when working the slip stitch at the end of each round, always insert the hook into the third chain of the beginning chain. Once you finish these rounds, continue with the sixth round. First, make one chain. This is the beginning chain of single crochet. It doesn't count as one stitch. Next, pick up the position of the beginning chain. This is where the slip stitch was inserted before. Work one single crochet, then pick up the next stitch. Correspondingly, make 2 single crochets evenly. After that, work 4 half double crochets. Continue to follow the chart for the rest. After completing the last stitch, pick up the first single crochet and work a slip stitch. Pull tight. The sixth round is now completed. For the remaining rounds, whenever the first stitch is a single crochet, you need to start with one chain. And this beginning chain doesn't count as one stitch. At the end, pick up the first single crochet and join with a slip stitch. Just refer to the chart from here on. Complete the remaining rounds. After finishing, leave a tail with the corresponding length for sewing. That concludes the explanation for the outer ear. Next, we will work the inner ear. Start by making the required number of chains. Then, starting from the 5th stitch from the end, pick up one strand on the top of the chain and work 5 double crochets evenly. Follow that with 1 half double crochet. The adjacent stitches are indicated in square brackets. Work 5 half double crochets into the same position. Then pick up the other side of the stitch to continue crocheting. This is the insertion point on this side. Work 1 half double crochet evenly. Follow with 5 double crochets. Then work 1 DC 2 in 1. No slip stitch join is needed at the end. This completes the first row. Continue to the second row. Start with 2 chains. The turning chain counts as 1 half double crochet, then turn. Work down from the second stitch on the left side. Evenly work 8 half double crochets. Continue following the chart for the remaining part. Work the last stitch into the position of the adjacent chain. Pick up 2 strands of yarn for the stitch. Complete the final stitch. This completes the second row. If sewing is required, leave a corresponding length of yarn for sewing. If using glue to attach, leave a small tail and break the yarn. This concludes the explanation of the inner ear. Next, we will assemble the inner ear with the outer ear. Pick up the outer ear, press the piece flat along the yarn tail. Ensure the end with the yarn tail is facing inward. The bottom of the piece tilts outward slightly. Then pick up the inner ear. Match the edge of the piece with the bottom edge of the outer ear. This slightly raised side corresponds to the angled side of the outer ear. Place it in a relatively centered position overall. Then use the reserved yarn to pick up the edge and sew together. Alternatively, you can use glue to attach it securely. If gluing, place all the yarn tails on the wrong side, pressing them inside. Here, I'll demonstrate the method for sewing. Use the reserved yarn. Pick a spot slightly inside the edge of the piece to insert the hook. Try not to pick up the stitches directly on the edge. Keep the edge intact and aesthetically pleasing. There's no strict requirement for the method, as long as it's secure. Once completed, tie a knot with the yarn. Then weave it inside the piece. Everyone can finish this on their own. This way, the inner ear and outer ear on one side are assembled. The assembly method for the other side's outer ear and inner ear is the same. Pay attention to the direction. The side of the inner ear that protrudes outward should correspond to the angled side of the outer ear. Similarly, fold along the yarn tail. One end of the yarn tail should be on the inner side. That is, the side of the piece with the single crochets. Everyone can finish this on their own. At this point, the explanation for the ears is complete. Finally, we will install the facial features. Start by embroidering the nose. Refer to the chart and pick up the corresponding yarn. Take a long tail of yarn, then separate it into 2 strands. Unravel 1 strand at a time here. Thread the needle with the yarn. Skip a distance of 4 rounds from the collar. Occupy 4 rounds in the top position. Embroider the nose. Here, embroider a Y shape from the topmost round of the 4 rounds. Select 3 stitches that are relatively centered. In the center between the first stitch and the third stitch. Embroider a horizontal line. Start by leaving a little yarn tail. Then skip 3 rounds below. At the position of the centered stitch, pick through the middle of this stitch and exit. Embroider a vertical line. While doing so, press down on the horizontal line. Here, pull the needle out from below the horizontal line. Then bring it out above the vertical line. Skip 2 rounds down from there. Insert the needle into the middle stitch of that row. This completes the Y-shaped embroidery. Next, tie off the yarn tail on the wrong side. Weave any remaining tails inside the piece. You can finish up from here yourself. And that's how you embroider the nose. Afterward, move to the sides of the nose. Position 2-3 stitches apart. Attach the eyes symmetrically. Make sure the side with the highlight is facing out. Place it vertically, with the larger highlight towards the bottom. Then sew or glue it on securely. You can finish this part on your own. Next, add blush below the eyes on the sides. Again, ensure the wrong side of the piece is facing out. Place it in the correct orientation. Then sew or glue it securely. You can complete this part on your own. Finally, attach the ears. Here, I'll demonstrate the method. Turn the inner side of the ear outward. Place the 2 outer ears side by side. Start with one of the threads. Sew a few stitches where the 2 outer ears meet. Position it directly above the bag opening. Use the reserved yarn to pick up and sew the bottom opening. The space between the ears should correspond to the nose. Start by sewing one side. After finishing the edge, tie a knot to secure it. Then, take the yarn tail to the back and tie a few more knots. Finally, weave the yarn tail inside the piece. You can complete this part on your own. Sew the other ear using the same method, maintaining symmetry. You can complete this part on your own. That concludes the explanation for attaching the facial features. Next, we will discuss the flowers. Pick up the corresponding yarn. Start with a magic ring. Chain 1. Then, pick up the stitch and work 5 single crochets. Close the ring. Join with a slip stitch to the first stitch. Pull tight. Change colors for the next round. Break the yarn. The first round is now complete. Move on to crochet the second round. Join the yarn at any stitch from the previous round. Start with 3 chains. Work a DC2 in 1 in the same position. Weave the 2 short yarn tails while crocheting. Leave the starting yarn tail for later use. Continue by making 3 more chains. Work 1 slip stitch. This completes one group of stitches in the brackets. Proceed to work the next group. First, pick up a stitch to the left and work 1 slip stitch. Mind that the stitch might be woven here. Pull the work apart while crocheting to check. Then crochet 3 chains. Work 1 DC2 in 1. Crochet 3 chains. Work 1 slip stitch. This completes the stitches in the brackets. Continue following the chart for the rest of the work. Finish the last group. Pick the insertion point of the starting group. Crochet the final slip stitch. Leave a 10 cm tail and cut the yarn. That completes the second round. Tie and secure the knot with the starting yarn tail here. Trim the starting yarn tail short and place it on the wrong side. Except for the last round's yarn tails. Trim off all other yarn tails. This finishes one flower. Follow the same method for the next ones. Complete the corresponding number of flowers. Pay attention, the flowers come in various color schemes. After crocheting, proceed with attaching them. Here, the flowers are positioned below the ears. Install them horizontally along the curve of the bag opening. Make sure all flowers face the right side out. Use the reserved yarn tails. Sew through the bottom of round 2 on the wrong side to attach. There's no specific requirement for the method. Just ensure it's secure. Everyone can complete it on their own. That concludes the explanation for the flower. Next, we'll make the leaves. Start with a foundation chain. Crochet the corresponding number of chains. Then begin from the second to last stitch. Pick up one loop of the chain. Work at SC2 in 1. Work 1 half double crochet. Work 1 single crochet in the adjacent position. Chain 2. Single crochet 1. Then pick up the other side of the stitch. Work a half double crochet. Work 1 single crochet. Then pick the first single crochet. Join with a slip stitch. There's no need to tighten here. Leave a 10 cm tail, then cut the yarn. Trim the remaining yarn tail from the starting point. This completes a single leaf. Make the rest of the leaves in the same way. You can finish them on your own. After completion, attach them to the flower. Around the flower. You can refer to the placement in the finished product for positioning, or adjust according to your preference. All the leaves should have the right side facing out. Then use the reserved yarn from the leaves. Sew a few stitches at the end with the tail left. Only sew one end here. Leave the other end unsewn. The sewing effect can also be adjusted according to your preference. You can finish this part on your own. That concludes the explanation of the leaves. Next, we will make the tail. Start with a magic ring. Crochet in rounds. There are no new stitches or methods introduced here. Simply follow the chart to crochet. After crocheting, leave a tail for sewing, then stuff it inside. You can complete this part on your own. Once the crocheting is finished, proceed with attaching it. Make sure the right side of the main part is facing you. Then locate the foundation chain of the bottom, between the first and second rounds at the top. Find the centered position. Install it horizontally in that spot. You can complete this part on your own. That concludes the explanation for the tail. Next, we will make the carrot. It is divided into the main part and the leaves. Start by crocheting the main part. Here, we use a foundation chain to begin, then work in rounds. You can directly refer to the chart and crochet accordingly. After completing, stuff it with an appropriate amount of filling. Afterwards, leave a little yarn tail to close the opening. The method is the same as for closing the front paws. You can complete this part on your own. Now let's crochet the leaves. Start with a magic ring. Then crochet 4 chains. Begin from the second to last stitch. Pick up one strand of the chain. Work 1 single crochet, work 1 half double crochet. Work 1 single crochet. Then pick up the ring and work 1 slip stitch. This completes one group of stitches in parentheses. Follow the same method and continue crocheting. After completing, close the magic ring. Leave a long yarn tail and fasten off. That's how you finish crocheting the leaf. Next, attach the leaf to the main part. Place the leaf at the foundation chain of the main part, in a relatively centered location. Then use the longer yarn tail to sew. You can start by tying a knot to secure the two ends. Pick up the base of the leaf and roughly sew it to the corresponding position on the main part. Afterward, the starting yarn tail can be woven inside the piece, or you can leave it for now, keep the remaining yarn tails, and that's how the leaf is attached. Finally, proceed with the assembly. Use the leftover yarn tails from the previous sewing. Pick the position behind the leaf where the zipper loop will go, and sew a few stitches to roughly match it. After completing, you can tie a knot with the starting yarn tail, or tie it to the main part. Then weave the remaining yarn tails and knots inside the piece. Everyone can finish this on their own. That concludes the tutorial for making the carrot. And at the same time, we've covered all the decorations. Up to this point, the entire bag has been fully explained. If you have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website. Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next episode.